All right, folks, welcome to the December edition of the American Praetorians live stream podcast, whatever the hell we're calling this thing. We've got James Rosone back this month. We're going to talk some geopolitics and some Ukrainian war and whatever else comes up. So, James, welcome back.
It's good to see you guys, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, because that's just around the corner here for us all.
Merry Christmas.
Fuck the New Year. Holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Mike had to say it.
Well, Mike has always been the most politically correct member of this.
That's me.
Group.
That's me.
Yeah.
He's been our sensitivity reader and our.
I'd like to wish a blessed Jim Cotta to all who observe it.
There we go.
You mean the source material for Resident Evil 4, right?
Yes.
See, sometimes these two guys out nerd me to an extent that I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. So,
well, we're talking about bad movies and then video games that were modeled after bad movies.
If it makes you feel better, I don't even know what I'm talking about a good chunk of the time. So, life is easier that way.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss, man.
It really is.
Stick your head in the sand and just, forget about life. Just carry on.
So,
I mean, everybody says, like, yeah, ignorance is bliss. It works. Just the magic words, I do not recall. It gets you out of everything.
I do not recall. I'm sorry. I don't recall that. I'm sorry.
I have no idea who this Sam Bankman-Fried guy is. I
have no recollection of receiving any campaign finance, any campaign funds from, who was he? What was his name again?
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Oh, yeah. So this $2 million donation from his corporation, don't ring a bell. What? I don't manage that stuff.
Yeah.
No, but Witchgut, he definitely hedged his bets because that's where all of the money that we sent to Ukraine ended up, and then magically disappeared while he's giving all these donations back to the politicians that signed in that military aid package in the first place. So,
and once again, I'm hearing Joe Pesci. It is now laundered.
Yeah. Well, it was laundered in the sense that the same way where if you burn your shirt, it's technically clean. So you've just done your laundry that way. But
I do know that Sam Bankman-Fried he could be kind of played by Jesse Eisenberg in the movie.
Dude, if you put a bad Halloween wig on him, he could be played by Joe Pesci. Like,
he looks like a hobbit. He's kind of like a hobbit, a little fat hobbit.
Yeah, and his girlfriend looks like an orc. So
you just look at that guy and you think, yeah, I'm going to trust this guy with billions and billions of dollars. He looks like he knows what he's doing.
No.
How about the fact that the whole executive leadership of this company all lived in the same mansion in the Bahamas? Apparently, there's one big orgy fest. I mean, what's up with that?
Well, now he's in jail in the Bahamas, so that's going to end well for him.
I mean, years, guys, when we're talking about Caribbean orgies, like looking at those two, it's like I'd rather be on Little St. James Island in that case. Like that's.
I mean, you're a billionaire. Come on.
It's the second most horrifying thing to happen in the Caribbean in recent memory.
Yeah. Well, Epstein comes to mind. I mean, the dirt this guy's probably got on people is going to be quite big, and naturally that can't come to light. So, we'll see.
And the fact that everybody apparently fell for his shtick just because he put forward this effective altruism thing, like, yeah, he wants to help people. I'll trust this kid with my money.
Caveat. It worked. Nobody fell for that shit. They understood it and were all on board because they stood to benefit from it.
That's probably the more likely case.
The only reason this came to light is because one other asshole that wanted to do exactly what he's doing has his own crypto exchange called Binance. The guy goes by the name of CZ because those were his initials. It's not the vastly superior firearms company. He initiated a bank run on FTX in order to take out the competition. And now what he's trying to do is buy up all the basically the chaotic assets at this point so that he can have like this self-made monopoly on his exchange.
Mhm.
Now,
And that
there
was
was pretty much no other way this could end. It's all unregulated. These kids are all in their 20s. This was how it was going to go.
I mean, I got some bad news if you think regulation is going to fix it.
No.
Because they basically, so the way this came to light is because like they were already committing crimes. So they're already going against the regulations that are already in effect. And then most of these regulations aren't actually laws. They're regulations that are put into place by a self-regulating organization, an SRO. So it's basically, if you have a corrupt police department and anytime something comes out, the cops union or the police union comes out and says like, yeah, you know what? This guy did nothing wrong. We investigated them and they were okay. That's basically what it is.
Let me put it this way. Instead of regulation, instead of this, how about this? There's no adult supervision going on. This is all very cloistered off. There's nobody coming to look in and say, hey, is this all legal? Is this going to work out for everybody?
I've got even worse news for you. It absolutely had adult supervision because they were paying the adults. I mean, we want to make fun of this guy for looking like a childish loser, and he is. But at the same time, he knew that the only reason he could even achieve this $10 billion, fake Ponzi scheme was who he had to pay off.
Yeah. Well, what's sad is that they arrested him the day before he was going to have to testify before Congress. And that was engineered to happen so he wouldn't testify before Congress.
Was he going to have to testify? What if he was going to show up? I mean,
no, they were going to do video telecom, I think, or something along those lines, or whatever it was.
Because he was hanging out in the Bahamas for a reason. Like they could subpoena him all they wanted, but that wasn't going to mean anything. Which is why Maxine Waters was like, "Yeah, we're not even going to bother with a subpoena." So,
well, that and because she's one of his buddies. So,
but I mean, so was everybody else on that finance committee. That's what I'm saying, or at least enough that he had protection. So. Yeah, what they're doing is they're arresting him now so that they can, basically save face because I don't think they're worried about the optics here.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're actually going to get anything done because let's tie this back to the Ukraine thing. This is how every government grant to an organization that gives financial contributions to campaigns and things like that. It's just one big money laundering thing. It turns tax dollars into campaign dollars. That's all it does.
It's like a government opinion. You think about it.
We saw the same thing. For whatever anybody thinks about it, this is what Planned Parenthood does because they get all these funds from the federal government, and then what do? They donate it back to the Democrat politicians. It turns tax dollars into Democrat campaign dollars. And you'll see a lot of it with the hedge funds for Republicans. And so this FTX thing.
You look at the political donations last few cycles, man.
But both sides do this. Both sides do this. But in this FTX thing, if you're wondering, what Ukraine is actually doing with these, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that hasn't really materialized on the battlefield. Well, that's because they put it all into FTX. Well, FTX is one tool. They put it in all these tools that cycle it back to the people that just gave them this money. They keep some for themselves. So it's this game of kickbacks.
Wait till the reconstruction starts. That's
I want. Our Marshall Plan is going to be.
Yep. That's when the real crooks are going to come out.
War's actually got to end. Well, I would say that the war actually has to end, but we kind of saw that level of corruption in Iraq and Afghanistan for the last 20 years too. So, does it really?
Why do you think it lasted 20 years?
Yeah. So just in case anybody out there is thinking this is something unique to Ukraine, like, oh, this is the globalists and the WEF and no, this is just how it's done. This is going way back, right?
So you want a case of Iraqi corruption, okay? So,
do tell.
April 2007, I was up in Mosul. We got we got punted up there to go handle a particular case. Some Christian missionaries got kidnapped. So me and my analyst and one of the other interrogators got sent up to Mosul. Normally we were down at Camp Cropper. So we get up there, we check in with the chief for the division internment facility. He's like, I just sent them down to Baghdad yesterday. I'm like, what? We're here for like 2 weeks to deal with these prisoners and you just kicked them to Baghdad. Well, we're here for 2 weeks, so we're working for you. And it's really interesting because we had a colonel, one of the brigade S2s that got rolled up. Apparently he thought he could coordinate some intel exchanges with a former military member of his who happened to work for Al-Qaeda. I seem to forget that we can listen in on these things. You would not believe the corruption this dude was narking on about inside stuff there. So you have the Iraqi commander in charge of northern Iraq there. Well, he's given a couple of construction projects. That's why I say construction is where all the racket's going to happen. He's supposed to be overseeing these work projects, connecting roads and all kinds of different infrastructure projects all over these cities and villages connecting into Mosul, right? None of it's real. Like, they're making up all the names of the employees, submitting these time cards, and then collecting all of the money. And most of the soldiers, they end up paying a portion of their salary to their commander, and then they don't have to come to work. The fuel we provide for the vehicles for them to go out on patrols gets sold off on the black market. I mean, this was a common occurrence all over Iraq. And it's happening even worse in Afghanistan because there's even less oversight over there. So, yeah, it's going to be really, really bad inside Ukraine once they actually get to that stage of the reconstruction. First, they got to get out of the war stage. And I don't know when that's actually going to happen. Yeah, you're right. DynCorp. I worked for I worked for a company called GLS. They were a division of DynCorp when I was over there. So
I used to work for DynCorp too.
Yeah.
2004 to 5 in Qatar. And,
I was there from 08 to 09 under the Global Linguist Solutions, the GLS contract. We had a contract for all the linguists in Iraq. So
I was part of the security guard force at Camp Asaliya in Qatar. When we got there, it's been long enough. Here's how it was when we got to Qatar. When I got to Qatar in 2004, right? I landed at the airport, Doha International, in July of 04. There's no one there to pick me up. They gave me a phone number that didn't work. And I didn't have a cell phone. This is 2004, right? Everybody didn't have cell phones back then. And if I would have had one, it wouldn't have worked in fucking Qatar.
What did your pager say?
Right. So fortunately, the guy from the company was there to pick up somebody else. And he happened to get there at the same time as me. And he gets there, we called him Chili because he had a chili stain on his shirt. And that was kind of his permanent nickname. And he took me back to our villa. We didn't have American ID cards. There was no status of forces agreement. We had to purchase with our own money a 2-week tourist visa, and then we went to work with this tourist visa, which was illegal. As per policy, the company took our passports from us and held on to them for us because under Qatari labor laws, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say you just became a Filipino slave.
Yes,
Yeah.
Under Qatari labor laws, right? Your employer, your sponsor holds onto your passport for you so you can't leave. And if you run off without them, they would put ads in the paper for people who had absconded. Right?
Oh, wow.
You had to get an exit letter from your sponsor to leave the country. They did this to it. We were Americans working at an American military base, guarding Americans, and they did this to us, right? And the starting wage when I was there was $9 an hour.
What?
And yeah. I mean, there were no income taxes taken out, but still.
Who cares? Why would you go through all that for $9 an hour, man? You get like $150 in Iraq.
And it was, everybody in Qatar was hoping everybody there was hoping they'd meet somebody there to get a job up in Iraq, right? It pretty much didn't.
So you were working for exposure, basically.
Yes.
In theater, basically.
We later got to pay up to $12 an hour, and even in $04, that wasn't great. You know,
I was
there
gonna,
was,
you
there was a little
shark,
bit of
you.
per diem. There was a little bit of per diem too, but it wasn't great. I mean, they provided you with a house, but you had to get your own cell phone. You had to, yeah, it was, and they were so short-handed. You were supposed to get a day off every week. I averaged one day off every other week for the first couple months, and then for one time I went like a 47-day stretch
Mm.
with no days off because they were that short.
Nice.
Apparently, before I got there, they got busted putting dummies in the guard towers.
They were not the first or the last to do that. I knew a couple guys that worked with the
And
triple
this was
canopy
after this was after the human trafficking scandal in Kosovo, which I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know about it, but you know that was a thing involving DynCorp. So
When were you with Triple Canopy, Pete?
I wasn't, but I knew a couple of guys who were. They were on the Bastion Leathernet contract.
Mm.
And yeah, Echo silhouettes in the guard towers to make up for missing
Triple Canopy
personnel.
had two different contracts. They took over the Whips contract from Blackwater. That's the one I went on after DynCorp. I went over to the Whips contract. And then
You poor soul.
I know.
guys,
The front of the man camp was cool until suddenly we were in the red zone. And I don't know if you recall the animosity between the Ministry of Interior and Blackwater, pretty strong. And obviously everyone on the man camps, Triple Canopy, well, that's really just Blackwater. That was a very interesting time to be in the red zone.
So Mike, with all of this craziness going on in Qatar with your contracting gig, where did you find any inspiration for Dead Six?
just living in the country, because we didn't live on like the base or anything. We lived in the city. We lived in a little villa in the city. And the way it worked out is like all the little housing complexes are their own little walled compounds.
Yeah.
So I lived in one called Royal Gate Residential Complex. It was brand new, looked nice, kind of shoddily built, you know, but it was nice. And you know, I would go take a taxi and go to the internet cafe every night or when I was off because I didn't have, like, there was no internet in the house and I didn't want to pay for it. I mean, remember, this is 2004. There was no smartphones and everything back then. I had a cell phone, but the only cell phone provider in the country was QTEL, which is run by the government. And the Qatari government would monitor everything. Qatar is a police state, you know, they're kind of low key about it, but yeah.
All those countries are.
Yeah, but that's how I got the inspiration for Zubara from Qatar.
Wasn't I seem to remember that Welcome Back, Mr. Nightcrawler was originally in Doha, and then it became Zubara.
I originally called it Saradia, which is what I called the fort in the book version. And the origin of Saradia, that's a real obscure reference there. It's from the 1990 film Godzilla vs. Biollante. It's a fictional Middle Eastern country that I think is a portmanteau of Saudi Arabia. So that's where that came from. I don't know if anyone ever picked up on that one. You got to be a pretty.
Well, no, because I always called it Saradia.
Yeah. You got to be a pretty big nerd to catch that one. So I don't know if anyone ever did.
Damn, what's the South American country in Predator?
I don't know.
Valverde? No,
Valverde.
that's Commando.
No.
I guess they just use it for all the Arnie flicks then, because I thought Valverde was Commando.
Maybe it was both. Maybe they're in the same universe, Commando and Predator.
I mean,
yeah, and, you know, the very common German name Matrix.
Yeah.
well, I mean, they called them Dutch in the in Predator, so
Could have just been John Matrix's call sign.
it could. But I'm wondering, what is the deep lore in Predator? All right, let's get serious here. Was he actually Dutch, or was that a call sign because he's German and they said, "Oh, you must be Dutch," and he's like, "No, I'm not." And like, shut the fuck up. That's your call sign now.
I mean, did he have a plan? But yeah, DynCorp was a crooked company. They're still
I'm shocked.
They got their tentacles in everything in DC. And yeah, I left. I was one of the very few people who finished his year. When I got hired, you originally had to have military experience or law enforcement experience.
Yeah.
Later on, if you just had any kind of private security experience at all, they would take you. You had corrections people, we had, private security people, and it was just they just needed any bodies they could get.
That's right. I was on a program where, officially it was like you had to have so many years of special operations stuff. When I got selected for it, when I applied, that was still the requirement, but I was just like, maybe they won't give a shit. And I sent my stuff in. Well, they read my application or my resume when they were in a lull, and they lowered it down to, all right, as long as they have this many years of combat experience, right? So that you didn't have to be soft anymore. And then I get on there, and there's guys that are on that program that are like, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just a cop. I've never done that. So apparently, like, depending on what their manning requirements were, they would raise and lower the requirements to the point where at one point in time, it was like, hey, if you're just crazy enough to do this, like, you don't need any experience.
And it's recommendations if you knew someone in the company too. That helps.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. You don't need to be special operations or whatever to do static security anywhere.
No.
You can be barely functional and man a guard tower. You just need to stay awake and have eyes.
Even that could be
surprised how hard that is for some special operations guys.
Those guys are high strung, man. And then suddenly you're plop them in a guard tower and you're bored out of the gourds.
No, I've known some former special mission unit guys who tried to do mobile security, and it was too slow for them. Said, I'm done. I'm out.
So the point of all this, the listeners, is this is just how the business is. This is not some unique thing to Ukraine. It isn't something to do with the globalists or the WEF or this is how it's always been. It's just there's too much money involved for it not to be crooked on some level.
Yeah.
And I want to point out, for anybody who ever reads an action thriller or a sci-fi thriller or military or anything like that, and a lot of the plot hinges on everything being so corrupt and conspiratorial and all that. And you read that and be like, all right, that's getting a little out there. That's not how it works. Yes, the fuck it is. You would be absolutely shocked how out there the real thing is.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have a construction contract, right? So hypothetically, let's assume construction contract to rebuild the roads, the highway from, Kyiv down all the way down to Crimea. So they say, okay, this project is going to cost $50 million, and we're going to award this contract to Fluor. Now, Fluor is going to get that contract with a stipulation that they're going to hire Coop's company, and Coop's company is going to be a subcontractor under this prime. He's going to get 25% of the contract, and then or whatever. So what do we say? It's going to be $50 million. He's going to get 20%. So he's getting $10 million. Coop's going to get $10 million to be a sub. Now he's going to go. He's going to hire a local national Ukrainian company who's going to do his portion of the job, not for anywhere near 10 million. They're going to probably do this for $500,000, and he's going to pocket the rest. That's how this whole shindig works.
Well, and
it would go to family members of various elected people who happen to have partners in corporations and different things. It's a shell game. That's how most of this stuff works.
And here's the thing: if I feel that my 10 million is not enough, here's what happens. I get hooked up, or I hook myself up with supplier companies that I know from previous experience and previous jobs. And I tell them, hey, you're going to be my sole suppliers for all this business expenses and parts and all that stuff. Even though it might be cheaper for me to go somewhere else, and it might take less time for me to get this stuff from somewhere else. But since I'm billing all this stuff to the client anyways, I'm going to massively inflate the price, or I'm going to tell these guys, hey, jump that price up a lot. It doesn't matter. It's not coming out of my pocket. It's coming out of the client's pocket. And then what you're going to do is you're going to give me a kickback for all these lucrative contracts that I'm sending your way and all these lucrative orders that I'm sending your way. We know they're 4 times what it actually costs to supply and go and pay all your people to get it to me. So since it's 4 times as much, take away 25% for the actual price of the part, take away 25% for me, you're still making 50% more than you would on that item.
Yeah,
so
and if it's cost
everybody wins except for the client.
Yeah, and if you get it to be like a cost plus contract, you're set, because then you can just raise the costs up, continuously.
And it's taxpayer money, so they don't actually really give a shit about tracing it anywhere. I mean, look at the recent Pentagon audit where 60% of our assets, we don't know where they are.
Yeah. Well, all right, so you guys want to talk about like circling back to like some of the stuff in Ukraine, right? With contractors. Okay. So Germany is finally giving the Ukrainians these Gepards, right? They're a tracked 35 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. They're really good, high tech, got a great targeting radar on it.
Powered by Russian oil.
Yeah. Well, they're a great vehicle for going after low-flying aircraft, helicopters, and, oh, by the way, drones. The problem is ammo. This is always a problem in every war, freaking ammo, right? So the Germans get the ammo for this Gepard from Switzerland. That's the only company that manufactures is Switzerland. So Switzerland has a requirement on ammo when they sell it to you. You can't re-export it to a nation that is in an active conflict. So they've given these Gepards to Ukraine. They have the existing stockpile of munitions that they had with it. They have no more ammo they can give them because they can't buy any more ammo from Switzerland if they're going to export it to Ukraine.
What I love about that stipulation, though, is if I'm an ammo supplier and why would I follow these rules or even agree to these rules where, my customers are only going to people that don't actually need it?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. Switzerland is a neutral country, and as long as the nation they are selling it to is not in an active conflict, it's not in violation of any of their actual laws.
Right.
So they'll sell to everyone. They don't have equal opportunities here.
But that goes back to what we were saying with all these kickbacks and that shit. So if I'm in Switzerland, here's what I do. I sell it to a country that's not at war for a markup with the understanding that they're now going to sell it to Ukraine for whatever price they want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's crazy, and we can't even have a civil conversation about this kind of topic or anything related to this online at all, because everyone is so in the tank that at the moment you try to say, okay, let's walk the dog here on logistics and supply and how this stuff works, they immediately attack you and go after you that, oh, well, you must be supporting Putin. It's like, are you a moron? Nobody's supporting Putin. We are trying to point out a simple fact that ammo you can't just go on like Amazon Prime and say, I want more ammo and have it delivered.
Which is a crime in and of itself.
It doesn't work.
Honestly. Pure BS that the DoD fails their audit. They hamstring themselves with utter refusal to implement the internal controls and properly fund and support the audits.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if they actually supported the audits, then they might not be able to pad things out the way they do.
Bold of you to assume that the Pentagon wants the audits to go according to
just the sheer waste of the yearly dumpex.
My thought on that is like, people assume that that means there's tanks and fighter jets missing, and I don't think that's the case. What I think it is think about all the incidental stuff that the Department of Defense purchases, like copiers and furniture and computers and office supplies and personal equipment. it gets bought at the unit level in a lot of cases. What kind of chain of custody is on there, really? There's a change of command. It gets moved around. Who knows when it got bought? Who knows where it ends up? It's hard to keep track of it in that big of a system. And once the commander retires, it isn't his problem anymore. So, right? So,
well, that's the thing, is that these audits don't always come around after a term of contract has ended for the guy that was there. So all this shit has already been signed over like 4 or 5 times, and the people who are responsible have already left the building and they don't give a shit anymore. How are you going to hold them accountable? I mean, are you going to court martial a guy that's been out of the service for like 10 years?
It's not that I think there's like
the power
missing or anything. It's
just happening.
What was that?
I can see it happening. It depends on who's in charge at the time.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Mike.
So no, it's not that I think there's like weapons missing or anything like that. It's just,
well, unless you're 3-6.
I mean, in my Air Force unit, we had M16s in storage that were so old they were, Colts AR-15 marked, or Colts Armalite marked AR-15 M16A1 overstamps with serial numbers that started with 00. So they don't throw the shit away.
Which unit was it, Coop, that they caught somebody dumped a 50 cal in a dumpster? Do you remember?
Oh, no, I don't.
And that was a dead drop. That was
I was well. The 3-6 thing was an inside job. That the car came up right when there was like a change of guard or whatever on the fire watch, and grabbed these 2 unattended rifles off the side of the road and then spun the fuck out. So this car of people that were willing to do this, which this is well beyond federal crimes. This is weapons trafficking of regulated firearms and all this stuff, stealing from the military, blah, 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 all this stuff. So this is some deep shit. This isn't just some prank. They knew exactly where this unit was, where they were in the field, on what range, how to get on that range and get out without running into range control, without running into any sort of checkpoints, which, I mean, Lejeune, it's not like it's under lock and key anyways. But exactly when to do it, and when to do it when any sort of resistance would be delayed. So how do they do that? By having somebody there with a fucking cell phone in the field texting them now.
Yeah. Did they ever figure, when did this happen? Whatever happened to it? What came about it?
So their like Christmas leave or their holiday leave block got canked, and they were held, and they were like police. Of course, the Marine Corps would make you police call for weapons that were obviously stolen and like were witnessed to have been stolen. But basically that whole unit was on lockdown for at least it seems like a month. And I don't know who got charged for it. I'm sure they charged the officer and the corporal that were their weapons were now unaccounted for. But I don't know if they ever caught who was the inside man, or if they ever tracked it down, or if they're were given to some Mexican cartel members by the ATF. But we won't go into that.
Yeah, I always wondered, like, if somebody lost a weapon in the field and they couldn't find it, they make them stay out until it's found, was how the military does it. But what if they never find it? Like, is 3-6 still out there?
He's still out there, man. He's gone.
3-6 has some internal problems beyond that in terms of morale, which I'm sure that obviously was a catalyst for. But I think in their battalion parking lot where it says the BC and the sergeant major, somebody drew like dick sucking graffiti between the two on the parking lots and that stuff right before 96. So there's a group in that unit that is all out of fucks to give. So
well, there are always those guys.
It seems like the beatings didn't increase morale. That's all I'm saying. Is
they never do, but that doesn't stop the command.
I'm so happy I have my DD-4 214 to protect me from this bullshit.
Yeah.
You know,
A good old DD-214 blanket.
this kind of stuff is not relegated to Department of Defense or overseas contracts either. I mean, talk to anybody who's done, just has worked with the federal government for any kind of contracting. This is how it is up and down. It's ponderous. It's crooked. It's, you know, they don't pass their audits, but you better pass theirs or you're in trouble.
Oh yeah.
I just want to point out for Evil Penguin, I know he's making a joke, but he's not far off. And it's not so much that they lost their rifles. Several of the holdouts, at least the ones up into, I believe, 1960 something. In one case, like he knew the war was over, but he was not going to stop doing guerrilla warfare on the local populace until his commanding officer, who they had to pull out of retirement to come go to him and properly relieve him. That's how deep in their brains this military doctrine was.
That modernized Bushido.
That is the most Japanese thing I've ever heard.
Well,
it was Japanese. It was the most imperial Japanese thing you've ever heard.
The most imperial Japanese. That's an important distinction.
Yeah, they really turned a corner after the bomb. You know.
Oh man, dude, I am dreading the Crimean animation that we're going to get in the coming decades.
Ukrainimation.
Oh.
We're going to short it to Ukrainime. You know, it's going to.
I have not watched it. There is actually a Ukrainian mini-series about the fight for the airport in Donetsk back in like 2014, 2015.
Wait, you said that's an animation?
No, it's live action.
Okay, I was going to say, because that shit takes years to fucking make.
Honestly, I gotta say, I feel bad for the Ukrainian people getting caught up in this because they are on the receiving end of a bunch of shitty international politics, and tens of thousands of them died.
Yeah, once James comes back, I actually found. I think I sent you guys the link earlier today. Here we go. So, James, you were talking about the inability to actually have an honest conversation about some of this stuff online because everybody's wedded to one or another ideological narrative. And I actually found a very interesting article this afternoon on Russia, Ukraine, and the fogs of the culture war.
Is this some NAFO bullshit?
Culture war.
Okay.
Throw it up in the chat, too, so people can read it on their own.
I mean, yes, just the bold heading right there. But they were working hard for that before there was even a Ukraine war. They were working at that before Russia invaded Crimea back in, 2014?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean,
he's not really, he's not saying this is necessarily new. He's just kind of mapping out how it's progressed over the last, particularly the last year.
Right.
That if, like this one is that if you don't support all of this progressive stuff that most Ukrainians, which Ukraine is one of the most Christian countries in Eastern Europe, maybe second to Poland, they have nothing. They don't want to have anything to do with that sort of thing. But to people on our side of the pond, if you're one of those knuckle dragging conservatives, then you're on Putin's side. Where,
yeah, but I mean, like they were doing that for which one? Coney 2012. If you wanted a lower personal tax rate, then you were now supporting Coney abducting children to turn into child soldiers.
There's a name I haven't heard in many years. Good
God. But it's the tactic's not new. Basically, it's the same way that terrorism in the 20th century really started to skyrocket in tandem with the increase in mass media and like television rather than radio and newspapers. That's when terrorism skyrocketed, was because now you could use the media exposure to your advantage.
Yeah.
It's add the internet to that, and instead of just terrorism, it's the political warfare game.
Yeah.
You know,
and the other thing is this starting. It really kind of kicked into high gear in 2016 with the whole Russian collusion thing.
Yep.
As this next reason 3, the boy who cried wolf effect. It's like the same people who were trying to cozy up to Putin in the first half, at least the first half of the Obama presidency, including I'll have more flexibility after the
I was
election.
going to say, did you consider the flexibility? I mean,
yeah. The same people all of a sudden are screeching about the Russians are the root of all evil while they're taking money hand over fist from the communist Chinese.
What's terrible, honestly, is how many people are dying because of this. Like, I mean, Ukrainians are dying by the hundreds of thousands. It is really bad because they inadvertently admitted like 100,000 Ukrainians had died, which statistically that probably means at least 3 times that many were wounded in this war. And somehow they have 360,000 Ukrainians that are, quote, missing. Soldiers that are missing. They're not missing. They're in small little pieces blown all over the battlefield from Russian artillery barrages.
Or they somehow got across the border and don't plan on going back.
Yeah, or they just ran across the border and left. Because you look at like Ukraine, they talk about how Russia's had these people leaving the country and everything. Well, look at the number of people who have left Ukraine. You're talking like a quarter of the population is just gone. And do you think that they're going to leave America or Germany or the UK to go back to Ukraine after the war is done to what is going to be left of that rump state?
I know of 2 people that left Ukraine at the start of the war that elected to go back, and it was because the rent was too damn high in the UK.
I remember that.
Yeah, and that's almost the worst part about all of this lack of
Conversation.
Not even the conversation is just one of the things that he points out in that article is everybody is knee jerk one way or the other.
Oh yeah, I mean, how many of our fellow right wing deplorable friends went hardcore for Putin, where it was this thing's going to be over in a week. If it's not over in a week, then that's 5D chess. Okay, so it's been going on for 6 months, but obviously, Putin got suckered into this by this nefarious, NATO thing.
It's like the doctrine of cauldrons. You don't understand. Yeah. This is all one big cauldron. It's a cauldron.
It's either not happening at all.
I'm very glad that we have Mike here for this stream. Mike, can you tell us more about this the OSINT Twitter? And
OSINT, in case anyone out there doesn't know, OSINT is open source intelligence, right? And these guys, they're a bunch of nerds who follow the war and other things all over the world with publicly available material. I follow some of them on Twitter. It's interesting. They come up with a lot of good stuff. And it gets you a good appreciation of what's actually happening over there. But a lot of them are completely in the tank, NAFO nerds, and they don't realize how cringe they are. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of this, you have people. I remember when the war started, Mike Cernovich was questioning whether or not it was real because there wasn't GoPro footage from all over. Like, what do you think the average wage of a Ukrainian soldier is versus how much a GoPro camera costs?
But also he said that while like the rest of the Twitter feed was footage from cell phones on the Ukrainian front.
This whole thing has been insane from day one because as Americans, we did the most American thing possible and we made it about us.
Of course.
It's got to be about us, right? It's
well, you get what you pay for, so it might as well be us.
It is. We own them.
But and I genuinely feel bad for the Ukrainian people because they are trying to save their country from an invasion, and their plight has gotten caught up in the left-right culture war in the United States. And they don't even understand the American culture war, much less have anything to do with it.
Right, because if they did, they'd have more people of color in their military, which it's surprisingly not diverse, which is very offensive.
You mean, there aren't a lot of,
But I'm surprised. I expected more black people in the Azog battalion. That's all I'm saying.
And you could tell that they don't understand American culture because all their attempts to appeal to American culture are just, they appeal to like the media people on Twitter because that's what they think American culture is. They don't understand that how broken up and polarized and how much we all hate each other, because it's really hard to wrap your brain around that if you're a foreigner. You got to be deep into the USA lore to understand all of that. So they do these things that they see these reporters on Twitter retweeting and like, oh, the Americans like this, when 2/3 of the country are rolling their eyes at it.
Yeah. People are honestly just tired of, I'm thinking about it. We just finished this Afghan war. And how do we finish that in a complete debacle? We abandoned more military equipment in Afghanistan to the Taliban than what has been given to Ukraine so far. I mean, imagine all that had been given to them. But worse, 19 years of war, trillions and trillions of dollars spent on these things. And we don't even get 6 freaking months of peace before we jump into a war with Russia. I mean,
That's
America.
If it weren't for the money laundering aspect, the sensible thing would have been like, hey, Ukraine, you can have all the military equipment you want. It's available in Afghanistan for you to go and pick up. We won't stop you. There's also some Russian stuff there too, if you want it.
Instead, we're depleting our own stockpiles.
The
and
problem
not
is,
replenishing them.
part of the problem is like nobody in a position of authority, nobody in politics, from what I've seen at least, has really made a case to the American people why it's in our interest to help Ukraine. I mean, I can think of reasons, and people can think of reasons, but has anyone like really talked to? Have we actually had a conversation about this? It's because it really feels like from the start it was just, well, obviously we're going to support Ukraine, or else you're in bed with Putin.
Well, that is the appeal. That is you've had at least a decade of nothing but emotionally driven, shame-based politics.
Because
for our own domestic stuff, nobody makes a case to the American people anymore.
I'm not one of these alarmists about all these kids on Twitter crying about a draft in World War III and whatever. But there is some risk here, right? Mm-hmm. This is a serious matter, and the American people deserve to have have it explained to them and to have their input to their representatives. And it really feels like we haven't gotten any of it. This is all just happening without anybody's input.
Well, because here's why: if you make a case to the American people and give them the choice, they might say no.
Well, then so be it.
And so you can't have that.
And that is not preserving our democracy.
Apparently not.
Keyword being our.
Democracy died. Democracy died when Trump killed internet neutrality, along with everybody else. We all died. Everybody's going to die whenever any of these policies go through.
The afterlife is a lot lamer than I thought it would be. I'm not going to lie.
The what is?
The afterlife is a lot lamer than I thought it would be. I'm not going to lie.
Hey, we're not dead yet because I'm not guarding the streets. So
I don't know, man. I just look at it from the perspective of, can we not just take care of our own house, our own selves for once? No. Like when you're flying in a plane and the emergency oxygen masks come down, they tell you to put it on yourself first, and then you help your child or the person next to you. You don't help everyone else and then help yourself, because you'll die. You'll pass out and you'll die. And that's the situation we're in. we are trying to put the emergency mask on every other country and person around us except ourselves. And as a consequence, we are killing ourselves and imploding. Like we have had, there's no Russians have killed any Americans in the last 2 years. But I can tell you 100,000+ Americans have been killed directly as a result of Mexican cartels flooding our country with fentanyl. Now, why is that not worthy of the same level of military attention and effort that we're doing in Ukraine, where no American has died as a consequence of that war, but we have 100,000+ dead in less than 2 years from the cartels south of us? We should be going to war with these people and going down there and just eliminating that threat. That's killing our people.
The flippant response is because the Russians are white and the cartels aren't.
The
more realistic and sort of black-pilled response to that is that, yeah, the Russians haven't killed any Americans in the past 2 years, and the cartels have killed hundreds of thousands. And the cartels will fucking kill you if you publicly say, hey, we need to go out and do this, and you actually start making action about that. If there's anything that we have learned in the past 20 years, it's that violence works, and that which got terroristic threats work.
Yeah.
Why are we so afraid to talk about, hey, this jihad thing, it's fundamentally tied to Islam. We can't say that because, like South Park tried to show Muhammad, right? In one of their cartoons, and Comedy Central said, you're not doing it. And they said, why? Aren't you for free speech? It's like, no, we don't want to get bombed.
Yeah, we don't want to die.
Violence works. Which got 2020, the summer of love. A lot of people came out and were saying, it was like, no, we support you. Don't bomb our don't firebomb our places and don't loot our places.
Yeah.
Our company supports you because violence works. And then, whereas the other side of that, if you make a unscheduled tour around the Capitol, now we're going to drop the hammer on you because you really didn't do that much damage.
Disproportionate use of the system. It was
There's
just
another
really over the top.
There's another possible angle here, and most of the evidence is circumstantial, but the term is elite capture. And I'm not necessarily saying that the cartels themselves have managed this elite capture, but Chinese sure as hell have.
Yes.
Now, if you've ever read Unrestricted Warfare,
Yep. Talk about it in our books.
I tried reading it in the original Chinese and just couldn't because I don't speak Chinese.
It's bad enough in the English translation.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was like, maybe it makes more sense in
it's like a PhD thesis or something,
But one of the forms of warfare mentioned in that book is drug warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Where is most of the fentanyl coming from? China. Where's a bunch of the meth precursor chemicals coming from? China. There's a sizable amount of circumstantial evidence pointing to Chinese triads facilitating a flow of heroin from Afghanistan across Africa to Latin America and north, because there's been a flood of cheap heroin coming in the street.
Like Title 42, right? Gavin Newsom, far left-wing governor, is coming out and saying when this is lifted next week, it's going to destroy California. Even he realizes this is going to destroy his 2024 aspirations. And now
but he's also trying to shift the blame from himself and be like, no, this next thing, that's going to be what destroyed California, not,
No, I mean, there's a news article he wrote about today and yesterday, really big stuff about him coming out, slamming Biden about this, saying, you got to fix this crap, because go figure, California has these really good safety nets and whatnot. So they passed a recent law where they're going to provide universal health care to California residents, right? But it includes illegal immigrants and people who are undocumented in the country. So that's a huge magnet for them. And the magnet is okay when you have a few 100,000 people crossing the border annually, not monthly. That's a problem now. And it's got to get handled because we cannot. You can look at the drone footage. You just cannot have 10,000 plus people walking across the border on a daily basis. It's not sustainable.
But if you're a rival superpower that wants the
Russia
US
and
to
China are
collapse,
probably funding and doing that because they know it's destabilizing us internally.
Yeah.
But
Right.
think about it. When all of this people come in, it's so easy to take advantage of these people and entrap them because the cartels will smuggle you across for a fee, and you will work that fee off for them when you're across the border. And if you don't, your family back home is dead or you are. So you have created this massive undercurrent of essentially modern day slavery that's run by these cartel groups, or you have massive under the counter workers being used by various large corporations and companies that need this kind of labor, and they can pay them cash under the table, bypassing the whole system, and it depresses the wages for everyone else. It's from all these different angles, and it's just destroying the inside of the country. And we got to fix this thing. It shouldn't be Republican or Democrat. It should be about basic human decency.
No, there's your first
basic
problem.
I know, right?
It's basic human decency. It's the fact that, yes, there is a strategic attack being undertaken on this country via drugs. Drugs are being used as a strategic weapon against us, and it's working.
Yeah.
And just the fact the nastiest irregular war on the face of the planet is right on the other side of that border, and it has spilled over multiple times.
Yeah,
It's spilled over multiple times, but everybody's afraid to make it go hot, and because then it gets even messier. And because which way you're not just going, it's not like the punitive invasion into Mexico because of Pancho Villa. All right, when you have hundreds or at least thousands of Pancho Villas just sitting waiting for shit to pop off already in the United States. When you cross that border to try and put an end to the situation, now you have all these guys behind enemy lines on our territory who are going to make shit messy back home. And that's going to cause a lot of discontent with the officials.
There's certain ways to handle that, though. I mean, if you want to get down and dirty,
I mean, yeah, we could.
Around unleash JSOC and a few other entities, plus them up a little bit.
We
You'll
could
be bloody for a couple of months, but you'll handle it.
But I mean,
rules off.
Possibly, but I'll play devil's advocate here. They said the same thing about Iraq and Afghanistan.
No, the difference is you're not going into nation build. You're going in there to kill people.
We absolutely would go. We absolutely would nation build, though. There is no way we're going to destroy.
You got to come up with a rule.
Nobody makes money off of killing the enemy. They make money off of nation building.
Steal all their stuff. There is narco money. Just steal it. There's your money.
We're not gonna like bomb Mexico and then just leave them in chaos.
What I'm saying is you go into those specific regions and areas and you start targeting and taking out those networks and where those people are at, where those hostile actors are at. There's no reason to, you can be pretty precise with this kind of stuff.
Right. But James, what I'm saying though is, yeah, you can do that and you can probably make some progress in those regions where those networks exist. But unlike Iraq and unlike Afghanistan, there are people in the U.S. that are willing and ready and able to attack the elected officials, or the assigned, executives in charge of that decision making.
Yeah,
Iraq didn't have this network of assassins ready to go.
No. What if you flip the script? Okay, so what if instead of the government, because our government's not going to do this, okay? What if we just finally said, you know what, enough's enough? We've seen in Ukraine that they have these international foreign legion brigades and units that are going out there doing stuff, and that's just a bunch of Americans and Europeans coming in there and fighting as mercenaries for Ukraine. Whatever. I'm not saying it's good or not. That's what's happening, okay? What if a bunch of Americans just said, you know what, we are just tired of this crap happening. And if the government's not going to do it, we're going to collectively rise up and we're going to fix the problem. And we're just going to park our asses down on the border and you just literally have like no shit, 100,000, 200,000 Americans sitting down there guarding the daggone thing. And when they want to cross the border, fine, put them all into these big old damn concentration, camps basically, and say, here they are, government, come register them all, and you take them over, and we're gonna YouTube this whole thing so we can show everyone that you're just catching them and letting them go. And we're going to shame the shit out of you by one, doing your job on the border, and two, documenting you letting them all go.
See, here's because if you tried that, you would get more shit from the U.S. government than you would from the actual cartels.
I know
why? Because you would have Mexican attack helicopters doing runs on those guys on the border.
Yeah,
and
because
that would be an attack on U.S. soil, on U.S. citizens, and the U.S. would be like, if we respond to this, that's a hot war that we don't want.
Yeah,
so we're just going to say, like, hey, this never happened.
Say it happened once, okay? These Americans sitting on the border, they're not unarmed. And a lot of them are probably...
They don't have attack helicopters.
No, they don't. But what I'm saying is these... First, I don't think the Mexicans would really go in and do that with attack helicopters because that would be a visually stunning thing to do and pretty hard to turn your eyes on. You're turning your eyes away. I think you'd also have several states that probably bring in their National Guards and level the playing field, so to speak.
They've done it on the National Guard that were stationed down there. That's why I brought it up, is they've done it before, and the reason nobody's heard about that is because that was specifically suppressed, not to the point where they made it go away entirely, but it never hit the news cycles, it never got spread across social media, and it never got responded to by the U.S. government because they didn't want to make it into an issue.
Helicopters using like 30-millimeter guns and rockets and attacking along the border like that? I mean, I would think.
Which one? Like, border installations have been mortared, and I'm gonna have to look it up. But there was a Mexican helicopter went over the border into U.S. airspace and dropped munitions on. I believe it was a National Guard unit that was supplementing Border Patrol.
Well,
I know the Mexican Army has opened fire on Border Patrol and National Guard before, but the Mexican Army,
that might be what I'm thinking.
The Mexican Army is also riddled with cartel sleepers.
Right.
But you get what I'm saying, though, right? At some point, there becomes a breaking point where people just say, enough's enough. We've sworn an oath to the Constitution. If the government's not going to uphold it and do it, we're just going to do it for them. And there's just too many of us. You know what I mean?
And I think the longer this drags on, becomes more inevitable.
Problems like this go on until they can't be ignored anymore.
Yeah, right now.
Well, it's the thing though, it still isn't affecting most people. Like I live in
doing a pretty good job of ignoring it.
Busing them has really helped it. Like buzzing them into the liberal cities where they were able to stick their heads in the sand. That has made it a huge difference because now they're being overwhelmed. And we've had more people cross in the 2 years of Biden administration than all of Trump and Obama combined. You just can't ignore stats like that. You're just so overwhelming. And they're saying Title 42, when that goes away, they're estimating 5.3 million will come across the border in 2023 alone. 5.3 million.
I'm just wondering who's going to be left in Mexico. Like, I'm not saying it's a small country.
Well, it's not all Mexico. It's more like it's almost like 120, 130 odd countries that people are coming from. It's a lot.
A lot of them are Guatemalans and Hondurans. And the Guatemalans are getting treated like absolute garbage by the Mexicans the entire way, too.
Mm-hmm.
There is a pecking order in Central America, and Mexico is at the top of it, and I think it goes all the way down from there.
Right, but that reinforces my half-assed point, which is more jokey than anything else. But it's like their populations are even smaller than Mexico. So, like, who's going to be left in that country if they're all coming here?
Maybe we should
remittances.
Annex some of these countries then.
I just wish they were all Panamanian so that we would have a reason or a standing to say, yeah, no, the Panama Canal's ours again.
Why not just say 70% of your population, just absorb all of Central America and just say this is now America, There's no more coming across the border anymore. You're in America now.
Somebody
And
needs
guess
to
what?
make
Now
a
we impose
Right.
FBI and all the other stuff across those countries now.
The problem is
Somebody-
you're absorbing all the cartels with that.
Of
And
Somebody
course,
needs to make a
now
meme
they're
of,
under U.S. laws, so now we can actually go after them a little bit.
somebody needs to make a meme of President Monroe with the laser eyes.
I know. If I did them in Road Doctrine, yeah.
I would be all about the United Americas, as it were. But we do have to fix we do have to fix the election machines in Brazil, though. Are we allowed to say that? Like, if we're not allowed to talk about our own, can we at least talk about Brazil's election machines?
Oh, it's not just Brazil.
Oh man, that was so incredible. That
Before we get on to that, there's a point I want to make about the drug war. And before I make this, I want to point out that drug abuse has had a horrible effect on my family. This year, I had a nephew die of an overdose, and I believe fentanyl was
sorry.
right. Drugs have destroyed my family in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, being devil's advocate here, the reason we don't treat, the drug epidemic as an attack the same way we would worry about like the Russians attacking Ukraine is because there is an element of choice involved. Nobody is forcing fentanyl down anybody's throats.
No, but they're
They're
releasing things intentionally trying to kill people. That's the
yes, they are. But
my counterpoint, I know you're just playing devil's advocate, Mike. My counterpoint to that is that it's not just a regular retail product that you buy because, you know what, it's convenient and it'll be more comfortable, or it's nifty and you want to try it. There is an element of addiction to it. That choice might happen the first time you use it.
Yeah, after that's not.
Once the addiction factor gets in there, you're starting to get less and less control over it, which is why it's so hard to break addictions and become sober and all that stuff. There's a reason I keep smoking. It's not because, it's not because these are like inherently, just satisfactory. There's a chemical addiction that I've had for 20 years. So it's like, I wish I could quit these. I can't. Thank God it's only cigarettes and not heroin.
I also don't think we should go to war with big tobacco either. So it's like,
Well,
they're already doing it. So
there is I think it's at the beginning of Cartel Land. There is an interview with a meth cook in Sonora, I think. And he's actually entirely above board and honest about it. Yeah, we're making poison and we're killing people and we know it. But we were poor and now we're rich, so we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, I remember watching that. Okay, so before you go on to the other thing, there's one last thing I want to circle back with you guys on the Ukraine thing that really is important because I think it was last week or the week before when they had the defense symposium at the Reagan Institute, right? So the CEO for Lockheed Martin made a very stunning statement during that symposium. He basically came out and finally admitted what nobody's wanting to admit, that to the current industrial capacity we have right now for producing munitions simply cannot keep up with the burn rate that's happening. So, for instance, he said that the United States is producing, writ large, generally speaking, 84,000 rounds of 155 millimeter shells for our artillery systems. And it's largely for training purposes, some foreign sales, things like that. The Ukrainians are burning through anywhere on a low day, 3,000 rounds on a low day, and on a heavy fighting day, 9 to 12,000 rounds a day. They are burning through the entire year's supply that the U.S. can manufacture in anywhere from between 11 and 23 days, is what he was saying. Now, this is the CEO of the largest defense contractor in the world. And he's telling you flat out, my corporation cannot scale to meet this kind of demand for between 3 and 4 years. And he said, at current burn rates, and you're giving this away, you will be out of munitions, I think he was saying, in 21 months. There won't be any more artillery shells. And the amount of ATGMs, okay, so javelins, HIMAR missiles, like the rockets themselves, those are critical at this level right now. Most of those systems, we have given away between 25 and 40% of our whole inventory. And in the case of like HIMAR rockets, you're talking about less than 1,000 are being manufactured annually, because we technically stopped producing HIMAR rockets in 2014. We restarted the line again, I think it was in 2020. So we don't have the capacity to do these things. Now we can build that and we can turn that on, but that does not happen overnight. That's going to take a couple of years to reindustrialize and make that happen. And if Biden and the people around him don't like use the Defense Production Act to say, okay, Ford, this factory is no longer producing civilian cars. You are now producing HIMAR vehicles. And this one here, you're going to be producing howitzer tubes. Okay, not the whole systems, the freaking tubes. You can only fire so many rounds out of a howitzer before you gotta swap out the tube. They're just toast. That's not getting done. And you look at all of that whole thing for this whole picture of what's going on in the war. Nobody is looking and talking about the logistical capability to sustain it beyond another couple months. And they're gonna get smacked with reality, and suddenly it's going to collapse because there's just nothing you can do to solve it or to stop it right now. Not without seriously degrading our own capability. If I'm China right now, I would be looking at this and saying, okay, we need to start seriously planning our operation. This thing needs to kick off sometime between probably May and November of next year. And to make sure the Russia war is still going, I would be funneling everything I could to Russia to keep them afloat and keep them going. Because make no mistake, Russia's not fighting Ukraine. Russia's fighting 30 other countries. The fact that they have survived this long is kind of a testament to their grit. They've been ejected out of the global financial system. Never happened in history before where America just ejected a country from the whole global system like that. The United States seized their government foreign assets. They seized the foreign assets of private citizens. This is some seriously bad stuff that's going to have a ripple effect, because if you are Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, China, a lot of other countries around the world, and you see that, you now know beyond a doubt that the United States cannot be trusted when it comes to the international financial system or your money in their banks or banks that they can touch. And that's going to have a ripple effect. You've got to think beyond Christmas, okay? You got to think beyond Ukraine. You got to think what is going to happen next. And this is a big problem that we've opened up Pandora's box with all of this.
I mean, it's kind of been our policy for a while, though, that if you invade another country, you might have problems with us. Like,
but who made the rules, though? Do you understand? Like, I was at U.S. European Command when we decided we were going to remove Gaddafi. Gaddafi, God's honest truth, at that point, he was actually more of an ally for us in the region than he was an adversary. He'd given up his WMD. He was helping keep a lot of the Wahhabis in Sahara Africa down for us. It was a relatively stable regime in that area. But when the Arab Spring happened, we banked on being able to swiftly remove him and insert a more pro-Western government that we could easily manage and handle. And we invaded that country, and we went in there and did that. Now look at Libya, 8 years later. Is that country better off after what we did? I mean, how many nations have we gone in unilaterally and just attacked, removed the government, swapped them out for whoever we want? I mean, I don't like to say that about my country because I'm a diehard pro-American.
I agree with you.
I'm like the bad guy sometimes.
I agree with you, but here's the thing: is I've seen people who legitimately think the Iraq War was an atrocity and who honestly believe that President George W. Bush is a war criminal. Turn around and basically cheerlead the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
I know.
They sound like Max Boot by proxy for Moscow.
Yeah.
And the justification I've heard is, oh, well, Ukraine provoked them, or Ukraine's on their border. Like, so we would be justified in invading Mexico?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's you're either anti-war or you're not. But this
Go
is
north. Get rid of that
war.
Trudeau asshole.
This is about left-right argument is what the problem is here. Like, you know, Russia chose to start the war. If they're mad that the West is having, you know, the West kicked them out of the banking system, well, that was the gamble they took. They thought we'd be weaker than we are, and they were wrong. They thought this was a matter of weeks. They were wrong.
The challenge is, again, I mean, I'm not pro Russia. I'm not pro Ukraine. I just want to take care of our own country for a change. And the big challenge is, again, we can want the war to continue ad nauseum for years, but we as a country and as political parties and everything else, we have not made the decision that we are going to actually set it up to happen for years, to keep it going for years. We're not putting in the capability to keep giving them weapons and munitions. If we really want the Ukrainians to win, then we have to actually be serious about wanting them to win by putting in place the industrial capability to give them the tools to win. Otherwise, all we're doing is setting these guys up to get slaughtered.
Mike, let me just step in on this one. This may sound flippant and reductionist. That we considered that around 2013 and beyond, we removed all the people in the head of our military that actually knew how to win a war.
Yeah.
And all the logistics that went into that for political appointments instead, or guys that would back them politically.
Yep.
We got rid of all the guys that were about the nitty gritty and what it actually takes to sustain a war and come out on top.
Yeah.
So now those are the guys advising the administration on what we should do for the Ukrainians.
Also, I wouldn't assume that the Russians are going to be able to hold out forever either.
Yeah,
but if you're China, and this is another point I wanted to make. When, James, you said, you know, China's looking at America booting out Russia from the global financial market, and they might get worried. Counterpoint to that, and this is just me thinking hypothetically, if I'm China, that might have been the greatest move for me ever, is the U.S. Kicking Russia out. Because now Russia has to come to me to keep funding their war. So now I'm making money off that.
It's actually more about BRICS. So right now we saw where China and a bunch of the other countries, they're working on this side deal. So when BRICS has its next meeting in the spring, I think it's the springtime, there's actually potentially a fair number of new members going to join BRICS. And when this is their long-term plan, is to create an alternate to the petrodollar. Now, say what you want, ensuring that the petrodollar survives, now that is worth going to freaking war over. We lose the petrodollar, we're done as a country. We're fucked. We're done. Because we have to be the reserve currency. You cannot maintain a $32 trillion debt and not be the world's reserve currency. You have to control that. And if we lose that, we're done as a nation. So that's why I say ensuring that is something you would go to war over, because that is an existential threat to the entire survival of your country. You know,
if we're talking about national survival here, if the Chinese decide they want to feel froggy, I would like to remind them that they can't feed their own population. They can't even begin to feed their own population. And we are one of their largest food importers. If we cut them off, we would have food in abundance, and millions of Chinese would starve. And they know that.
Look what we did for Russia. So Kissinger was very emphatic about trying to make sure that we do not push Russia into the arms of China or China into the arms of Russia. We want to keep those two powers separated. Russia is the world's largest exporter of food, also of like nitrogen and fertilizers, and has a very large border with China as for pipelines, things like that. It's going to take them time to pivot some of these pipelines and energy transfers to China away from Europe. But it's not like it's not going to happen. And the other thing to consider too is a lot of that food can come from Russia over there.
I mean, can it though? Because like I know Russia has a lot of fertile land, but what is their agricultural output actually like? How modern is their agricultural? I mean, people like to complain about factory farming in the U.S.
It's actually quite efficient, though.
The entire world by itself.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, look at it this way. Okay, so Russia has the whole Far East. This is a whole other thing. If we could have found a way to make Russia actually an ally, it would have been a better ally to have the Russians on our side with NATO in the containment strategy against China. But that's not the path we chose. So the Far East is legitimately actually more of an eyes on target for China to take from Russia. But now that the two are now essentially very tight blood brothers at this point, I don't think that's really a threat Russia has to worry about. But what could happen though is you could see big swaths of that area of Russia almost being like leased out to the Chinese to manage themselves, to go in and do the industrial agriculture that you're talking different.
China would never do that with another country. That's crazy.
Well, right now, China, as you look at the population demographics in
Africa?
Eastern, what was it, Eastern Far East Russia, like that, it's already like 2 or 3 to 1 Chinese to Russian. So they've already more or less assimilated it, so to speak, population wise. It's not going to take much longer to continue to grow that piece. But that's where you get all of your land. And again, you're talking about a country that can just build buildings and roads in very short periods of time because they have no regulations, impact studies, and did we kill a bird because we built a highway here? They just go out and do it. A massive population, and they don't care if their people die in the process. You can get a lot of mindset.
I think one of the issues with that is Russians. I don't know how the Russians are going to feel about their country just being gobbled up, parts of their country being gobbled up by China. I think that's going to happen.
Well, be overt gobbling up. It's subtle. It's more subtle than that.
Yeah, but I also think they're getting wedged into a place where they might not have a choice on that.
It's true.
Which is probably why China's really backing them for this Ukraine war, is to get them into a very desperate situation where they need to allow China to come in.
But like something you said earlier about how yes, it would have been great if Russia would have been an ally with us in NATO. I don't know that was necessarily all of our choice, though.
Hard to do. We never would have allowed it to happen. We need Russia as a boogeyman because it is look, if Russia's not the boogeyman, if Russia is brought into the fold, there's legitimately no reason to maintain and keep NATO around. And NATO is a way for us to be able to constantly have 28 countries that have to buy U.S. military-centric equipment, or at least integrated equipment, to be part of the alliance.
But I think what Mike's getting at is the elite capture part of the unrestricted warfare. Is Russia didn't capture our elites the same way that China did. I think, Pete, a while back you showed us evidence going back to the 50s of the Chinese already grabbed a lot of our major politicians and presidents.
What I was getting at, a couple things here. Like I'm going to point out, first of all, I've been a NATO skeptic for more than a decade. Like in 2011, I would say NATO was a Cold War dinosaur. It should have been dissolved long ago. So I'm not like a NATO, diehard partisan. But I don't think I think us being tight-knit allies with Russia, that requires the approval of the Russian people and the Russian leadership. And I don't think that's been on the table since Mr. Putin came into office. Not really.
It's been on the table since probably 2003, 2004 when we took in the Baltics and we took in some of the other nations around them.
Not just that, but President Putin he was a lifelong KGB man who he laments the fall of the Soviet Union. He's never going to be like the bro of the West.
Whoa. I was told that he was the guardian of the West.
Yeah, right, sure. Yeah.
When they're openly flying Soviet flags from Russian tanks in Ukraine.
So I don't know that. I think as much as people think that, you might think that, well, the West needs Russia as a boogeyman. Russia needs the West as a boogeyman.
But the West gives them the perfect boogeyman. I mean, we play into their hands repeatedly, time and time again.
Maybe, but on the other hand, say we prove the Russians right by bringing the Baltic countries into NATO. Well, the Russians proved the Baltic countries right by invading 2 of them. So it's like, I mean, they invaded Georgia in 2008, and
Live in the Caucasus regions.
Alabama's never forgiven them.
Yeah.
and
But
now
let me ask you, like,
it's like,
why? What is the strategic value? What is the merit, and what does Macedonia bring to joining NATO?
well, there's
What
none.
does Montenegro or Albania, any of these countries?
We don't have countries in NATO because there's actually mutual defense. We have countries in NATO because we want them in our pocket for some reason, and because we want to protect them from foreign aggression. It's not done necessarily in our own best interest.
Well, that goes to what James was saying, where you have 28 countries that are now buying U.S. military equipment.
And here's the thing, though. I don't actually think NATO benefits the U.S. that way.
No, our defense industries benefit from all of
I mean,
this.
does it? Like, most of these countries have domestic defense industries of their own.
Very minimal. I mean, when you look at Germany is now going to buy the F-35. They made the decision they're going to go forward and do that.
That was never a given, though. And they were, it's
If you have problems making enough 105 shells, imagine making enough F-35s to survive a long drawn out conflict where you're losing F-35s on every fucking mission.
I don't think there was any, to be honest, I don't think there's any plan behind the current state of NATO. There's no theory behind it. It's just institutional inertia. It's not about who's benefiting or who's profiting or anything like that. It's there because it's always been there. The treaty is still in place, and nobody is willing to try to, upset the apple cart and change it.
But someone
there's a European war. NATO's never going to go away now because.
So when I was at U.S. European Command, we're the de facto intelligence arm for NATO. The EUCOM commander is the NATO commander. The deputy EUCOM commander essentially runs the command, though. So when we look working there, you just get a good insight of how the whole thing operates. You just see what is the readiness status, how fast can these nations actually deploy a brigade forward. It is really, really atrophied across all of Europe. The whole ability to fight. They don't meet any of the NATO requirements for a lot of interoperability for the troops to be able to connect to the next higher echelon or to air assets. You've got from the industrial capability of saying, hey, can you actually supply your military with more than 10 days of ammo? And most countries just can't. And even the United States is in that situation now where we can't do that. And it comes down to either NATO is a legitimate military organization that has a set of requirements you have to meet and maintain, or it's just a boys club that everyone just wants to join to have America protect them, because they do not value their own national defense, their own security. They're not investing in it. We're 10 months.
Because then they would have to pay for it.
I mean,
they don't have to do it because America will sacrifice hundreds of thousands of its people and trillions of dollars in money if that's what's required to defend their country. We will.
It's defense welfare for some of the richest countries in the world, like Germany.
They have $17 trillion economy is how much all of the NATO members are when you minus out the United States. A $17 trillion economy, and they still can't fund a freaking military.
They're not spending it on the military. They're spending it on their fucking welfare.
There's a reason they have health care and we don't. I mean,
maybe we should look at that and say, can't we emulate that and just say, okay, we're gonna have the same caliber of military you will, the same defense spending, and we're just not gonna show up. I mean,
we could, but we won't. I mean,
it's frustrating, I mean, I'm 44. I don't want to see 20 more years go by, and my kid now has to go over and fight the fourth land war in Europe because these guys want to maintain their free everything and not have to actually defend and value what they have. If they don't value it, we should not.
No, we shouldn't. Like I said,
they're starting to face some of the consequences of not valuing what they have already. I mean, look at the growing backlash against. I mean, the Dutch trying to destroy their farming industry.
Oh, it's crazy.
The Germans destroying their energy infrastructure.
I mean, the idea that we're protecting Germany from Russia when Russia was Germany's biggest energy partner is absurd on its face.
If only somebody had warned them about that. And if only somebody had warned us about NATO, too. I'm just saying.
The people we're really protecting from Russia right now are the former Soviet states in the East, Poland and the Baltic states. Those are the ones, and they absolutely would fight if it came down to it. Poland would turn into a Catholic Afghanistan if the Russians invaded again. And
let me ask you. Well, let me pose the question to you, okay? Just an arbitrary question out there, not for one way or the other. If the Baltic states were conquered or captured by Russia, how would that negatively impact America, our national security, and the future of our nation, and for us and our kids? Would
it would more impact us economically?
What do they provide to us economically that we would now lose?
Oh, well, they buy most of our shit rather than from Russia. It's export partners at that point. Not what we're taking from them. It's what they're buying from us.
Yeah, so we have more illegals crossing the border than live in their nation. So, I mean, it's not like it's a big country.
It's a terribly overdone comparison, but you can also make the argument, well, how did Germany invading, Czechoslovakia affect us? Well, it didn't. It doesn't affect us until it does. That's the problem with international relations. And here's the thing: we are with the United States by itself, and with Mexico and Canada as our two biggest trading partners, which they are by far. We can survive isolated from the rest of the entire world if we wanted to.
Exactly. We wanted to.
We could.
United Americas. That's all I'm saying.
But I mean, I don't know if
what kind of world would we lead. Basically, is what comes.
I don't know if we're really prepared for just letting the rest of the world go to hell. And
what about charging a protection fee, though? I mean, it's like the mob. You don't want your store robbed, then pay a protection fee. I mean, that's if we're going to shoulder the burden and we're going to spend, what is the defense bill? It's like $840 billion or something, and we're in the middle of peace.
Adjusted, it's over $1 trillion.
It's insane. So if we're going to spend that on defense instead of having free healthcare and college and all this other stuff like you guys do, then maybe you should have to pay a defense fee. Just pay for it.
Well, but they have that and they don't pay it. It's called the NATO membership fee.
No, get rid of that. Get rid of all that, and just have them pay a fee to us to fund the DoD.
Personally, I don't think there should be like defense organizations like NATO anymore. They don't. They're trying to wrangle dozens of countries that have their own competing
personal interests, things like that.
I mean, we should be doing in Europe what we do in Asia. In Asia, there is no NATO in Asia because every country in Asia
bilateral
and is kind of racist against every other country. So we just have bilateral treaties with other countries that are very narrow and specific, and that's what we should be doing in other parts of the world too.
Do you think Asian countries are racist against each other? I got some shocking news about European countries.
Exactly. I just proved my point even more, though. Well, I just saw a thing on Twitter today.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying, which guy? At least the Asians, it's some weird, half a tint of skin color or skin tone.
I just saw a thing on Twitter today saying how people in Japan are outraged that their signs on their subways are in foreign languages also because they're digital signs. They rotate. They're not mad that they're also in English. They're mad that they're in Korean.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you find the exact same opposite flip in South Korea too.
Oh yeah.
North Korea just hates everyone, including themselves.
But just wait until they come to America, legally or not, and find out that all our signs are in Japanese and Korean too.
NATO made sense when the Soviet Union had a de facto empire half the continent. It doesn't make sense now. But it's just institutional inertia. It's like it's just been it never ended, and it's not going to end until somebody says enough is enough.
Do you think a lot of that inertia is from the fear of something popping up? If you're the guy that gets NATO disbanded, whether or not everybody's cheering or rah-rah, angry at you, and then something happens.
Oh yeah.
And then now you're the guy that disbanded NATO right when you needed it, you know?
It's the same reason nobody pulled us out of Afghanistan before Biden, because look what happened. Nobody wanted that. It wouldn't have necessarily have happened that badly, but let's be honest. It was always going to be a disaster. Afghanistan was never going to sustain itself as the country.
Better to be a disaster when we are gone and the cameras aren't rolling than when we're in the process of walking out the door with all the cameras on us.
But that's why they kept kicking the can down the road. I was in EOD school when President Obama gave the speech about how we're going to leave by 2014. Well, obviously that didn't happen, and that's why nobody wants to go like, no commander, no president, no politician wanted to be like, all right, you know what? Fuck it, we're done. This is stupid. We're going home. And then
Step one, and it wasn't Biden. That decision was made before Biden, and then Biden showed up in the office and changed the deal at the last second.
So yeah,
I think there was another factor to it as well, and that comes down to the. Somebody said that we weren't in Afghanistan for 20 years. We were in Afghanistan for 1 year, 20 times.
Yes.
And you don't make careers off of winning. You make careers off of not screwing up for your combat deployment and going home and ticking the next box.
Yeah.
And that I guarantee there was some spillover to the politicians on that, which brings me to my other point, is that we are being governed by a bunch of people who are either overeducated and underintelligent, in their dotage, or just straight up drug-addled morons. And
what was with the either? I think all three covers it, man.
All three then. But the point is that you've got a great deal of we've got at least 30 years of a combination of emotionalism, and I think this Francis Fukuyama bullshit about the end of history, that we don't never need to have the industrial capacity to fight a major mechanized war again, because those days are behind us. And
just ask Ukraine.
Revolution in military affairs and generations of warfare.
This didn't all come from the Francis Fukuyama types, the eggheads, right? I remember following the mill bloggers back in 06, 07, 08. Back in those days, it was very popular to say we should disband the Air Force and roll it back into the Army. That, regular conventional war like the first Gulf War was done. It was all going to be interventions like Iraq and Afghanistan from now on. All the smart people were saying. And a few years later, the same people who were calling for the disbanding of the Air Force were complaining that we didn't have enough long-range fighters for the Pacific, without any irony in the middle, So,
well, it goes back to what you were saying, where like the guys who think that George Bush is a war criminal and that Iraq was strictly for oil. Funny, we didn't get any out of it.
I know. Where's the oil?
Which guy? Now they're saying that Ukraine baited Russia into invading them, and that they had every reason to invade and all that shit. There's the memory of the goldfish, selective amnesia that goes on when you're always in front of, it used to be blogs and WordPress, now it's Twitter, and you're constantly refreshing that. You can't build the foundation for a coherent and consistent philosophy.
I tell you what, it is absolutely insane seeing people talk about recent historical events that I was there for, that I remember, that went that long ago, and they are completely wrong about them. And they are talking about them with being very sure of themselves. It's just mind-blowing.
Wait, are you saying the surge wasn't a failure?
I mean, just going back to 9/11 and the invasion of Afghanistan and all of that. It's like, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, James, that's something I've run into a lot on the internet, and I ran into it a lot, a couple of years ago, probably about the better half of a decade ago, where it's like there's this faction in the libertarians where it's like 9/11 was not an act of war against us that necessitated invading Afghanistan, but us giving an oil blockade to Imperial Japan was enough provocation for them to bomb Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Have you run into that?
I've heard that too, and I don't know. I mean, there's lots of ways to look at some of this stuff. I mean,
Right. It's not shocking to anybody that somebody on the internet has a stupid political.
well, the whole thing is, when you're going to go into war, our problem is we don't outline what do we define as winning? Like, what is a win? What is our objectives? How are we going to measure those objectives? And then we say, okay, this is what they are. We're going to go in and we're going to execute them. And then when we achieve them, we're going to get out. We just stay. We have no objectives, no mission, no purpose. Like, we don't know what winning is. Like in Iraq, okay, when the surge happened, when I was there, I got there a couple months before, okay, so we were getting probably 200-300 new prisoners a week coming into Camp Crawford. And you think that's a lot. Really wasn't, because when the surge kicked in, that number jumped from 200 to 300 a week to 600 to 800 a week. And those are just ones we're captured, probably killing 2-3 times that number a week. It was a bloodbath. And what changed the dynamics of that whole thing, we just put a lot of bad people in the dirt. And that's really what ended up happening. We removed a lot of people from the community, because the prison population, when I was there, was about 6,000-7,000. It ballooned to 34,000 when I left. And we just put a lot of bad guys in the dirt. And that changed the dynamics. And it brought in a chance for like the Sons of Iraq and all those other entities. Basically, some of them were bad guys. I get it. We just put them on the freaking payroll. And we got them to stop attacking us and attacking each other, because now they're just making more money working for us than they were for the Al-Qaeda and these other insurgency groups. But it stabilized it. And instead of saying, okay, we stabilized it, now we're going to spend a period of time mentoring and maturing the cadre and leadership in the military to keep this thing going. We said, fuck it. And we walked away. And everything, as soon as we left, the government in charge got rid of all of the non-political loyalists in the military, and they wiped out the leadership in the cadre we had spent a decade or 7 years building. And it was no surprise that things just fell apart the way they did. We had victory and we gave it away.
Good thing we didn't do that to our military, because we saw how that worked out for the Iraqis with ISIS.
Just
we basically just walked away from gains that were very hard fought.
Yeah, it was there, and we just gave it up.
We've been doing that since 1972.
I will say, though, that to some extent, the Iraqis voted for us to leave, and we respected that. And that may not have been a great decision strategically, but from the start, we went in there. We said we were not conquerors. We are not going to make them a vassal state, and we lived up to that.
There was a way to get a SOFA, the status force agreement. There was a legit way to make it happen.
We could have, but
Biden did not want to make it happen, though, and there was no negotiation and bend at all, and it just fell apart at the end, and that's what led the whole thing to, okay, we got to get out thing.
Are you talking about Iraq or Afghanistan?
Yeah, Iraq. I think it's 2011. They had to negotiate the SOFA, and it didn't happen. So 2013, we were out.
We probably haven't had particularly competent foreign policy in like a presidential administration since George Bush the first, to be honest. And even he was touch and go, because the Iraq War, basically, the invasion of Kuwait happened basically because Saddam Hussein got the idea that America wouldn't.
Ambassadors greenlit the attack, and we were ignoring their dispute and claims about the slant wells happening over there in Kuwait.
And Poppy Bush was more competent on that sort of thing than any of the subsequent presidents. So,
well, you want to talk about an end game and a win condition? Desert Storm. I mean, it's like we chased them all the way back to Baghdad. Everybody said, all right, now you can conquer Iraq. You can get rid of this problem for good. And Bush Sr. was just like, nope, I'm quit while we're ahead, and we're going to get the fuck out.
Yeah. I mean,
we met our objectives and we left.
Some people have claimed, I've heard people complain about that, but that wasn't the mission. That's not what they voted for. So maybe it would have solved problems ahead of time, but maybe it would have made the Iraq war that we had in 2003, maybe that would have happened in 1992 instead. And it would have been just as big of a disaster. Who knows?
Yeah.
So
At least we would have the army.
it certainly might have made the coalition fall apart.
But we would have had the army for it.
Yes.
We had a big freaking army at that time. I mean,
There was some, if I understand it correctly, there was some debate about that between like Schwarzkopf and Colin Powell too.
Yeah, Shortcoff wanted more, and Powell kept saying no. But at the end of the day, didn't they have like 500,000 soldiers there or something? I mean,
oh yeah, it was
four times what we had going into Iraq in 2003 or something. I mean,
that was the last ride of the Cold War military, and they. I remember years ago having a discussion. Somebody about he posted something about some apocrypha from an Iraqi army tank commander said he got bombed for so long and only lost one tank, but he fought the American tanks for a day and lost all these tanks. I put up a picture of the highway of death. Yeah, like these tank commanders weren't available for comment.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to see how things shake out in 2023, right? I mean, it's interesting. Like, I feel bad for like the Ukrainians, what's going on right now there, because the attacks on the infrastructure. So the vast majority of their rail network is electric. They have some diesel engines on there, but it's not the lion's share of it. And one of the keys that has helped the key strategy that has helped the Ukrainians thus far has been very effective use of their rail network. So they've been very good at being able to put units on the rails and just move them around the battlefield back and forth wherever they're kind of needed. That's been a very effective tool. And when you are burning through stupid amounts of artillery, it's a lot more efficient to throw it on rail than it is to have it on a bunch of 5 tons and get the fuel and drive all over the place across there, because you can only fit about 40 to 60 rounds on a 5 ton maybe. I mean, the rounds are heavy and they're big, but you can carry a lot on a train. So the Russians going after the electrical grid, they're crippling that. They're removing that from the equation, and they're making it way harder to then keep supplying the front line from Poland and the other tertiary countries around there when you can't use the rails.
I mean, okay, but Russia is crippling Ukraine's rails. But have you considered that they are losing the meme war against Ukraine?
Oh yeah, hands down. They're getting smoked meme war.
How do you balance that out though? Like, doesn't that offset the capabilities a little bit?
I think the big problem is what happens when all these buildings are freezing. They drop below temperatures, and you have frozen pipes. You start having pipes bursting in apartment buildings and government buildings and all things like that across every city in these different regions that are losing power. That's a serious infrastructure problem, civil engineering problem you're going to have to fix, because those buildings are not livable when the pipes are bursting and you've now got that to deal with, that water problem to deal with. These are all byproducts of going after the logistic network, obviously.
And, I will say, though, that speaking of logistics, I think the Ukraine war has kind of struck the death blow to the notion that modern Russia is still some kind of military superpower.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of people,
no.
Not personally, but I've seen a lot of people who bought into the mythos of, the
Russia. They sold us on the mythos.
They really did.
People failed in properly assessing this for the country.
I mean, this is a war on their own border where they can resupply by rail, and they are struggling.
Given, you have to also acknowledge, though, that Ukraine essentially has full-on real-time satellite intelligence of every Russian position inside their country and everything that's coming into their country at every time of the day.
They
have precision munitions like HIMARS, and you can hit these things when you know exactly where they are, and you have all of the SIGINT intelligence being provided to you as well. That's an advantage.
But that's exactly what they would be dealing with if they actually went to war with NATO.
Yes, it is. But what I'm saying is Russia is essentially already doing that. They are
in a way, but they're not. I mean, they're
not
doing,
facing an American brigade or division. That's the
No.
only thing they're not doing. But they're facing every other American intelligence, asset being thrown at them.
But
And
that's
Ukraine's
the
had it. That's a
thing, though.
huge advantage for Ukraine.
Even going back to like 2014, I've seen people saying about how much tougher the Russians are than the American military, and how they could handle us, and Russia tough and strong, and they're still coasting off of World War II.
I know. Yeah.
But I mean, this leads into one of my points, and this is just me from a grunt's perspective. I agree with James. I feel terrible for the Ukrainian people, and just so we're putting it out there, Ukraine's definitely in the right compared to Russia on this issue, but I feel bad for the Russian conscripts that are first up. Russians haven't voted for Putin in a while. None of those elections have been legitimate. And the main supporters of Putin are well above the age of military service, and most of them are women. It's the babushka class, right?
Yeah.
Not the ones who are fighting the war. So it's all of their grandkids and their sons and the young military age male population that didn't want this shit because they knew that they'd be conscripted for it, and now they're getting conscripted for it. They're not getting training. They're barely. Pete, what was the last OSINT on the Russian training? Like they're getting 5 rounds to a rifle to make sure that it works. They're not even BZOing it, and then they're fucking getting sent to the front.
They're getting like an orientation weekend or some shit. It's
college kids get a longer brief from the RA when they show up to orientation than these guys are before they get sent to the front. The AK-12 is not a good weapon. I wouldn't buy one. And they're just
when they're actually getting AK-12s, a lot of them are still rolling with AK-74s.
At least the selectors work on those.
You also have the Ukrainians are in the same exact boat, though. I mean, like they're taking people off the street and just basically giving them 24 to 72 hours of training, driving them in a truck and saying, "There's your trench, defend it," and they're wiped out.
Right, but here's the main differentiation I would make on that. Yeah, in terms of like training, it's equally shit. But the Ukrainians are facing an existential threat right now, so you're more likely to going to find a guy on the street who's just like, sure, how can I help? If this is how I die, but Ukraine live, good, I'll do it. The Russians are like, what the fuck are we doing? I don't want to be part of this.
Yeah.
And so if you're a fucking 17-year-old farm boy from Siberia, now you're getting loaded onto a train to go fucking die within 40 minutes of deployment.
I know.
Apparently, it's also disproportionate. They're disproportionately hitting the minority populations in Russia.
As they would. I'm not surprised.
They've not been conscripting heavily from around Moscow.
No.
That's where the power center
It's coming from the Urals. It's coming from Siberia. It's coming from north of Kazakhstan.
Yeah, it's coming from the minority populations that might cause problems further down the road politically. It's also coming from the people who are not in a geographical position to rise up and rebel against the government if enough of the shit that they don't want keeps happening. So
I think one of the problems they're facing is they thought Ukraine was worse off than it was. And I wonder how much of that was because of just corruption. I wonder how much just like the Russian generals were just bullshitting Putin about the standard.
Big time. Intel people doing the same thing. It's just like our Intel. Our Intel people led us to believe that Russia was an actual tier 1 military threat that we need to be spending $700 billion in defense against.
Yeah. I'm not going to say our Intel people aren't corrupt. They absolutely are. But our Intel people are massively incompetent. What Mike's saying, and it's the theory I shared the last time you were on the stream, James, it's that the Russian Intel assets and ambassadors that were given all this money to, butter up the local Ukrainians to say like, hey, just accept this invasion. They went over there and they're like, yeah, this is never going to happen. But they gave me all this money. So since I don't need to spend it on bribing Ukrainian politicians, I'm just going to put it in my bank account.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then it happened, and they're like, "Oh fuck!"
When you look at it though, it just sucks because both these sides are just getting used by outside factors, and at the end of the day, it's the conscripts on both sides that are just getting slaughtered, and they have no say in this situation. They're just pawns. I feel kind of bad for both sides.
It's also a lot of the Russian generals that are getting shellacked as well, thanks to a terribly 07 Iraq style kill chain. That I don't know where the Ukrainians are getting that.
Yeah.
So a lot of them were just a lot of the Russian generals are having to lead from very close to the front because their own internal communications just isn't that good.
Well, their officer corps
exist at all.
They don't have they don't have any NCOs, but their officer corps, they don't have really good lieutenants through majors who would normally be those commanders leading from the front from their units. So you're having to have a senior dude step down from his position, go unscrew the situation that a captain or a major should be doing, and he's getting popped right there. It's a consequence. But that points to another problem in their own organization where they have a really bad training process for their junior officers and leadership like that. Because if you're not going to have an NCO corps, man, you better have a really solid junior officer corps that's able to step up for that.
The officer corps doesn't exist to lead military, though. It exists to make political networks work.
These things were problems the Soviet Union struggled with for the entirety of its existence.
Yeah.
Couldn't have gotten better after the Soviet Union collapsed.
No, because I didn't have all the manpower to wash over the inadequacies.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Russia has like half the population of the U.S. and they're trying to fight this war with World War II tactics. They don't have the population base to support that anymore.
No, they don't.
They may have artillery shells stockpiled from the Great Patriotic War, but they don't have the bodies to sustain this. So I think sooner or later, if nobody gets a big advantage, this war is just going to grind to a halt because
someone's going to run out of manpower. Who's going to run out first?
Yeah.
Pete, can you highlight that comment by Stephen Persons, the most recent one? Yeah. So the National Guard unit down the road from my house, full of guys who barely fit in their uniforms, are better trained and equipped than the Russians.
Absolutely.
Yes. I've said it pretty much every stream we've done in the past 6 streams. America is the greatest military and warfighting force on the planet, not because we're good, it's because every single other country is worse.
Yeah, they're just that bad.
It's just you'll see it in the military when if you went in with that sort of really patriotic propaganda, drank the Kool-Aid mentality. You're just like, oh yeah, the Marines are badass, the Navy SEALs are badass, and then you actually start working with them day in, day out, or you are one and you see what you have to go through every day, and the amount of fucking retardation that is on display and that you participate in, you're like, there is no fucking way we are the best warfighting group on the planet. And then you go to war. And not only are you fighting other entities, but you're working alongside allied partners, and you see how the SAS does things, and you're just like, okay, no, I guess we are, because these guys are even worse.
And I have direct experience with that question. I enlisted in the National Guard in 1998. I was a senior in high school. I had to get a permission slip from my mom. Right. This is before 9/11. This is during the Clinton administration when the National Guard was a forgotten about leftover. We had M113A2 armored personnel carriers, the ones with the lateral sticks. One of them was so old, it had a placard inside that was supposed to be where the blocks of 30 cal ammunition went. Right. We had M16A1s. I had a GM Hydromatic M16A1. We had Prick 77.
Don't you wish you had that still, though?
Yes. Prick 77 rated in Vietnam, right? So this is all old shit. But I still went to normal basic training in AIT. We did 1 weekend a month, but that was after you were originally trained. And there were a lot of guys who were former active duty. I mean, we had a lot of veterans. My platoon sergeant was former special forces in Vietnam.
Yeah.
But a lot of these Russian guys they're getting a weekend of training, and that's it. That's all you get, and then you're on the front line.
So I wonder though, okay, if you're being drafted in and going straight to the front versus someone who is like my understanding is a lot of guys are actually former military, so they're reservists who've already gone through that training. So essentially, you're saying pulling National Guard guys and pulling them active. That's a big difference than just pulling a draftee who's never been through any training.
From what I understand, the first mobilization was like reservists or like who are like like the equivalent of our inactive reserve individual ready.
It's still better than a person with no training because at least they've gone through something. You don't forget all that stuff.
I don't know about subsequent mobilizations. They may be conscripting people. Now I'm not sure.
But I mean, the U.S. has been somewhat unique in that aspect with the draft going back to World War I. The first time, like we had a legit military draft for a foreign war, not the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
Which got the reason everybody says, the Americans showed up late on like the last year of the war. It was like, well, yeah, because we spent the previous year and a half training up all our forces. And then we go there, and then a year later, the war ends. So obviously it worked because, we were able to get it done when everybody else wasn't.
But we showed up, and they were more or less kind of cold.
Yeah, and we also hadn't been through the grinder for 7 years. But so we waited until like all of our initial draftees were fully trained under the tutelage of guys that had been fighting in the Caribbean for the entirety of the Banana Wars and shit like that. We had experienced leaders who were training our draftees, and we waited until our draftees were fully trained, and then we sent them over. And then when we went over, we kept unit cohesion. We didn't let them just get, dispersed into the British and the French forces. Blackjack Pershing actually had to fight for that because that's what the British and French wanted. They just wanted us to supplement their troops. He said, no, we're going to act as our own AEF units. Mm-hmm. Same thing in World War II. If you read any of the memoirs of the guys who, Pearl Harbor gets bombed, they feel patriotic, they go and enlist, right? They go through full basic training or boot camp and full Marine combat training or infantry training or whatever the Army equivalent is, and then they get shipped over. And usually they only get shipped over after they've gone to their unit. They wind up for at least like 2 months, and then they get sent over. And then at that point, they are supplementing American troops that have already been through the grinder and can tell them exactly what to expect. Obviously you're never fully prepared until you see it yourself. But we did that. Vietnam, our draftees still went through the full training cycle before getting sent over to Vietnam. Now, obviously, there's going to be different. Korea was actually an anomaly in that, in which case most guys skipped basic training in boot camp and were sent over on the ships. That's where they received their basic training, usually from the World War II vets.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, because Korea was a impromptu, a flash police action. It wasn't. It's like, hey, there's this war shit going on that we need to possibly get prepared for. Like World War II was going on for a while before we got involved. World War I was going on for a while before we got involved. Korea was the first one where we really just sent them in at the beginning of the conflict. Vietnam, the French and the South Vietnamese were fighting for a while before that. So we knew what we were getting into. Korea was the anomaly there. But in all of these instances, America really was one of the only global powers that fully trained their draftees. And in World War II, you really didn't have to worry about the draft until the numbers of all the voluntary enlistments petered out. But we were one of the only countries that kind of does that. And we're one of the only countries that has done that throughout history. Now, we usually have an advantage, and that's our geographical isolation. We're not over there in Europe where all this bullshit is going down. We're not over there in the Pacific where all this shit is going down. We're on our own little hemisphere. It takes a while to get anywhere, so it takes a while for the threat to come to us. But, Russia ain't doing that. So you have maybe 48 hours to 72 hours of getting shoved onto a train and showing up on the front. Hopefully you get a uniform on the way there.
I know, right?
I mean, all war is a clusterfuck, but from what I've seen, this one
is bad
level.
Well,
I think it's funny too. On a personal note, like one of the first like nonfiction things I ever wrote. I wrote an article for Soldier of Fortune magazine back in 2018,
Wow.
talking about the camouflage madness of the era. Right.
Mm.
When I was in Afghanistan, the U.S. military was fielding 10 different camouflage patterns at one point. Right. The fashion war started with the Marines and Marpat, and then just went full retard.
Which was a terrible pattern in the first place. I don't care how effective it is. What did the fat electrician call the M82 tricolor? God's flannel, the Lord's flannel. M82 Woodland is superior in all respects. I would wear that to the desert if I could.
But here's the thing, though. Like, so yeah, and all these, like, it's like half the world has kind of settled on some version of multicam now, even the Russians. So now you've got like the Ukrainians and the Russians wearing colored armbands, so you know who's on who's like they're fucking
playing paintball or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We are only like 2 steps away from coming full circle back to full color uniforms like the Spanish-American War.
You will wear your blues in the battle.
Just we got are. And I see that, and I'm like, I remember playing paintball. We would have different color armbands, right? I mean,
and it's it's got to be especially bad there because so much of their equipment is the same too.
And they speak the same language, you know. I mean, just Ukraine, you know.
The amount of friendly fire incidents there has got to be awful.
Huge.
Well, all right, can you blame them? They don't have the green or red diamonds on there. They don't see the username.
You mean Blue Force Tracker?
Like Call of Duty. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In the future, we forget that Land Warrior thing or the Crosscom that all the video games have, or whatever sort of HUD technology that we're trying to integrate. That's not going to fly unless you make it the interface look exactly like one of the first person shooters that everybody plays, because that's who your recruitment pool is.
Yeah.
You know, I saw an Army lieutenant had that damn thing when I was in Afghanistan, and he said he kind of hated it because it was just exquisite micromanagement. Like they could micromanage you from all the way to the top, right there into the field.
Yeah. Oh, I hated the Blue Force Tracker, and I fucking hated that Eye of Sauron, the ISR blimp, you know.
So there we were.
And the G-Boss, because those tools, they were so fucking, like, the potential use for them was awesome. And you know what they used it for? To
Why were your
our
sleeves
patrol, to make sure that our sleeves weren't rolled up or that we, like, our boots were blazed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there we were.
This is Afghanistan, where we get ambushed every fucking day.
We got called up for a nighttime IED. We didn't like doing IEDs at night because you can't see and it's more dangerous, right?
Right.
So we're out there. We got our truck parked. My team leader is in the bomb suit with a metal detector doing his clearance procedure. And they're watching us from this fucking blimp, talking to us on the radio. They're going by Wolf, Maine, trying to micromanage our IED op over the radio. And we're just like,
because that's OER. That's OER.
We had they called up one of the Army units we were with. Like, can you run interference for us? Because I'm about to lose my shit. And I don't need to get in trouble for cussing out some lieutenant colonel on the radio, trying to he's like, is you a EOD? Are you a tracker that the IED is on the right side of the road? Like, he knows what he's doing. Just let him fucking do it. We didn't even want to be out there in the first place, and it wasn't even anything.
You know what's funny is after I got out of the Marines, I went to work at the defense lab that developed that Eye of Sauron ISR system, and when they found out that I had gotten out and worked with them, they're like, "Oh yeah, so you must really like them," you know. And I was like, "I fucking hate them, and I fucking hate you for developing it," because it was used to fucking garrison us instead of, like scoping out, hey, there's a guy setting up on you in a tree line or some shit. The shit that it was actually developed for. But it's like, well, we didn't plan on that. I was like, yeah, but you have to figure out who your end user is. And it's a bunch of assholes.
Well, folks, we're a little over 2 hours now, so I think we probably better start wrapping it up. James, you got anything to push your chill for?
Hang on. Before we do that, here's a question. Peter Nealon, if you got recruited into G.I. Joe, what would be your code name?
It's not like you have a code name.
Probably the same thing my call sign was for years, Redneck.
Redneck. Oh man, that's fine. That's fine. I don't know, man.
But in G.I. Joe, you'd actually have to dress like your uniform would be like, denim overalls or something.
I know. You'd be later the cable guys. What would happen?
No. Because Pete was in the Marines, therefore he has to have like an 8-point cover or the EGA tattooed all across him. Because there's only like 8 at max G.I. Joe characters that are from the Marines. Everybody else is Army, and they're from the Marines because it's the most moto bullshit ever.
Yeah,
that's funny. Oh man. No, so like I don't know, 2022, man, was brutally tough year. I mean, as a writer, it was a great year. We put out some great books this year. It was tough, really tough. So honestly, I'm hoping 2023 is a better year personally, like a little more just kind of slow the pace down a little bit, man. 5 books a year is just kind of hard. I want to slow down a little bit. Enjoy it. What about you guys?
Mike, what do you got?
I mean, honestly, I'm still processing 2020. Like this.
2020, jeez.
But like now, I'm still working.
You're allowed to leave your house, right?
Yeah, you can leave now, and without a mask, depending on the state you live in or city.
There was a mask requirement in Minnesota in some stores.
Oh my God!
And it wasn't really enforced where I live very well, or very much. But after summer 2020, people just pretty much stopped doing it. The only times I had to wear a mask after that were at the VA and on an airplane one time. So it wasn't bad around here. There weren't
at the VA today, I had to wear a mask at the VA. I was like, really? My chiropractor to wear a VA. I was like, really?
I mean, there are a lot of people at the VA that look like they're on death's door anyway. So, but
the vaccine work. I mean, you've gotten you've gotten your 8 vaccines and 24 boosters. Either it works or it doesn't.
But I'm still working on a space opera called Twin Star. It'll probably be published next year. Probably be out for next summer. So
maybe one book, or how many books in the series?
This is the first book. Hopefully, it'll be a series. My last 2 were standalones.
Okay.
And that's kind of like a uncommon thing anymore. Like everybody is like pushing a series or everything's going to be.
I was going to say that's flat out rebellion right now in the publishing industry.
But I wanted to write a couple of books where you could just pick it up and read it, and you didn't have to worry about the rest of the books in this long overarching plot. They're just cut and dried stories where the character story arc was complete.
Yeah, we finished a series this year. Monroe Doctrine finally finishes this year, 2023, and then at that point I could focus in on the sci-fi and just finish that in early 2024. After that, man, I am not doing the split things again. I will knock out one series at a time in each genre and do that. But this 2 genres at the same time, that has mentally been just murder.
Yeah, Twin Star, like I said, I'm hoping it becomes a successful series. We'll see where it goes.
That's really, if you want to do this as a full-time job, man, that's what you got to do, because you get the series going, you draw the readers in, they go in, and you just feed the beast basically. And I mean, it doesn't have to be 20 books long. It just needs to be as long as it needs to be to tell the story and be good and pull them in, and then you just start the next one.
It also has to take advantage of the Amazon KDP reach algorithm or whatever.
Yes and no. I mean, my books are 6 months apart. I'm crushing it with 6-month releases, and they're 6 or 7 months apart. So I mean, I'm not doing that rapid release stuff that so many others do. And my books are $7.99 price points.
I can't churn out like 8 books a year to ride the algorithm like some of these dudes do. I don't even know how.
I don't recommend you do it either. You don't need to do that.
I pace myself. I'm kind of slow, but I put my best effort into everything, and maybe this is as fast as I can produce, but that's all right. That's all right.
Some of what
It
you
takes
do,
me longer to read it than it does you to write it.
well, you can sit on the books too. You just because it's written doesn't mean it has to get published. You can sit on 2 or 3 of these things. So when you do start the release, you can do that 90-day window where you already have the first 3 ready to go. So you're just staggering those out while you're writing the 4th one. And maybe that's the end of the series or whatever. So there's ways to kind of, I don't want to say game the system, but set yourself up for success so you're not going to get just destroyed with the schedule. Yeah.
Coop, what about you? What have you got going on in your life?
Oh God, pain and suffering. This is not a product I can put out, but
Depends. You can market. I can help you market that. We'll turn that into a hell of a book, man.
subscribe to my OnlyFans.
There you go. It's on your OnlyFans.
My
Put it on
OnlyFans,
there. We'll
OnlyFans is
series.
it's just me stress eating and being angry.
Your series is going to be called My OnlyFans.
Yeah, my struggle might be a bad title.
Yeah.
I heard that was the title of Kanye's next album.
Yeah, I heard that it's done quite well. I mean, it's made a lot of money, but I don't recommend it.
Don't take away Kanye's art degree. That might end badly.
Yeah. God, someone please get this man some help and keep him away from a mic.
Yeah. When he is visibly making Alex Jones uncomfortable.
I would say like he's never going to be able to show his face again, but that didn't even stop him.
No.
You know what?
It was real weird because he had this sort of like gimp mask on, and then you got like Salacious Crumb, this baby Hitler, Nick Fuentes sitting over here.
It's crazy. But you know, he's kind of like mentally jacked up right now. That if he ever gets fixed, he may never remember any of that. Fortunately, it would be documented for him.
Yeah. He won't be
He'll never be
alive,
allowed.
believe me.
He doesn't have to remember because the internet will never forget it.
I know, right? But you know, when you're a billionaire like that, I mean, I guess you have FU money. You can do what you want, right? I mean, geez.
Well, he did. He can't access it anymore. I think that's what drove him over the top.
I mean, who controls his money now?
I can't say that. No, his banks, after he made his controversial statements, basically cut off all transaction capability in his accounts.
Well, they can't technically.
Which I'm sure brought him back into the fold and made him apologize instead of just doubling down.
No, but I mean, they can't technically steal your money. Does he have like a?
No, they can't take his money, but they can stop him from accessing it.
That seems like it should be illegal.
Stealing.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah,
That
which is
hasn't
why
stopped
he's
anybody
not
in-
too thrilled with them right now.
That hasn't stopped anybody in the U.S. or Canada. Look at.
Yeah, but you know what? Here's the thing: guys like that have actual financial means, which means you can hire some high caliber lawyers who are just going to, make $200,000 in legal fees, but they'll sue the bank and get your
Well,
stuff.
if he was,
Yeah, but just wait until he finds out the demographics of lawyers.
Oh,
I mean,
my God.
if
going the
Kanye,
wrong path there, bud, man.
if Kanye had his wits together, yes, that's what he would have done. Instead, he had Nick Fuentes and Milo
No.
Yiannopoulos come.
I never even heard of this dude. I had no idea who this guy was until all this crap blew up. And I'll tell you what. Do you think Trump knows who he is sitting down to have dinner with?
No, because
no
if
freaking clue.
If he did, he would have been like disgusted to even sit down because
He would have left.
the only thing that people have heard about Nick Fuentes before this is some really weird shit that I'm sure Pete doesn't want to trip the algorithm and have a bunch of spam bots show up in the chat.
Let's not get into that, particularly not 2 hours and 18 minutes.
Yeah. No, but it's crazy because my understanding is was it Milo Yiannopoulos or whatever was running his campaign and whatever. This was a whole setup actually. They engineered things to do it. And they know the media is just going to lap it up and just play it for them, so whatever.
They're getting their revenge for being canceled, and they're using Kanye to do it because they don't give a shit what happens to him.
Milo got pretty hard in 2017, and he was pretty popular on the conservative talking circuit back then. He was going to be at CPAC, and then he just got canceled. Right? I don't even remember something. He made some joke about getting.
No, he didn't make a joke. He said Well,
He was
It's
He said
taking
the quiet part out loud.
shared that experience, and they did what they did to destroy him because they needed to destroy him.
But they completely removed Milo from like everything, right? And it broke his brain. He went like ape shit after that. He did not handle losing that attention very well. Nick Fuentes, you got to have your nose into some deep internet autist lore to even know who he is.
I've never even heard of these people.
Oh man, which I would, if you're interested, which you shouldn't be, but if you're interested, just look up Mr. Medicare, Nick Fuentes, and you'll probably get a couple of videos from like the Internet Archivist, which is this Medicare character, and he just goes through all the BS chronicling of this kid's silliness.
Or better yet, save your time and do something more productive.
You shouldn't be interested in this.
I have so little time. My time is I'm just trying to get these things finished so I can get them off my plate so I can have a life again. You know, that's my focus. Yeah. Well, it's 11:21. Or I need
I can't send files in the StreamYard chat.
Nick Fuentes, he's a temporal anomaly because I feel he's the product of that hypothetical Ukrainian animation post-war that we were talking about. This.
Oh yeah. You want to look up Vice News on YouTube and then type in Vice News and type in Azov Battalion. A lot of interesting stuff you'll find out from 6 years ago, and then the State Department and the Pentagon both have that as a sanctioned organization, thanks to Congressman Ro Khanna and President Trump, who added that to the 2020 NDAA, got them slapped on there. So some interesting things you can find about that organization. That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it's all been supposedly wiped. I mean, there's the saviors now, but
I didn't think that we would have to choose between the swastikas or the sickle and hammers again.
I mean, I could see from Ukraine's perspective, like they're being invaded.
They're fighting for you. Who cares? You don't care. I get it. So let's not pretend it doesn't exist.
I just don't want to pay for it.
I did find it funny though that a bunch of people on the internet with like Pepe the Frog in an SS uniform as their profile picture were clutching their pearls about the neo-Nazis in Azov. Like, really?
I know, right?
You can tell you were real broke up about this.
Yeah.
Honestly, the way the Ukraine has become about American politics, if for whatever reason, like the Biden administration was supporting Russia, then half the people would be supporting the opposite sides, just because of that.
It's so sad.
That's what it boils down to. It's just part of our team sports. You're for it because they're for it, or you're against it because they're against it.
Yes, my only statement on this is I can be in the stands and root for a team. Doesn't mean that I want to be on the field playing the sport.
Yeah. Kind of tired at this point. Too physically broke to keep going and doing that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
No. All right. Well, it's been great chatting with you guys. So
what do you have coming up?
Coming up, book 6, final book of The Lost, comes out at the end of this month. The Rock of Battle. Cover's awesome.
It's metal as fuck, bro.
Oh, yeah, it is. Came out with book 12 of Brannigan's Black Hearts last month, Concrete Jungle, and currently working on the first book of the new series, which we'll talk about later.
All right.
Yeah.
But it's more, the new series is going to be more along the old American Praetorians lines. More of the contractors going up the kill chain in the shadows sort of stuff.
You know that mercenaries and contracting like that is the second oldest profession in history?
Well, a lot of them double dip as the first oldest profession.
Just saying.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I gotta get to bed. So talk to you guys later. We'll chat after the new year.
Yep.
So happy Merry Christmas. I can say that.
Oh yeah. All right.
All right, man. Talk to you
And-
later.
And just to make
Right.
sure nobody thinks I support Kanye, happy Hanukkah as well.
Yeah.